Welcome to our devotional thought for today. We're exploring Jesus' words in Matthew 22, verses 37 to 39, about loving God and loving others. So the expert in the law was catching on to just how demanding love can be. You'll remember that he's the one who asked the question, which is the greatest commandment? He realized that it had more to do with his decision than something his heart did without his control. And maybe he was realizing that he wasn't that good at it. So he did what a lot of us do. He tried to find the loophole. But his question helps us answer our own. How can we love others? Because it was that question that prompted Jesus to tell the story of the Good Samaritan. You can find the story in Luke chapter 10, verse 25. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hand of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return I'll reimburse you for an extra expense you have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." Let me just point out a few details that will help us make sense of this story. The Jews hated the Samaritans. The injured traveler, he was a Jew who probably hated the Samaritan. He was in his own territory, while the Samaritan was in enemy territory where everyone hated him. The priest that passed by the injured man was also a Jew, and the Levite also passed by his own countrymen in his moment of need. They were on their way to serve God in the temple, and both of those men had believed that they had more important things to do. The Samaritan, in addition to stopping to help someone who most likely would never return the favor, took him to an inn that would never rent the Samaritan a room, but they were willing to take his money. And this is how deeply the Jews hated the Samaritans. At the end of the story that Jesus told, he asked the expert of the law who in the story acted more like a neighbor. Maybe you noticed the man didn't even refer to the helper, as a Samaritan. Probably because he didn't want to have to spit as he said it. The Jews had that much disgust for the Samaritans. But the lesson we learn is that our neighbor is anyone we find in need. So beware, your neighbor is closer than you may think. Look around you. Your neighbor is that person who has need for friendship, need for comfort, need for clothing, or maybe they need shelter. Perhaps they have a need to have just someone listen to them. Perhaps their need is for someone to sacrifice some comfort so that they can feel God's love. How do I love others? That's a good question. The way you do that is you find someone who has a need and you seek to meet that need.